The rise and fall of Tse Chi Lop was not just another chapter in the history of modern crime. It was also evidence of a deeper transformation in transnational criminal networks in the 21st century. Compared to Asia's Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, Tse Chi Lop built a synthetic drug empire that was said to have a financial and logistical scale greater than many of the most notorious criminal organizations in Latin America. In 2018, the organization was said to have generated as much as $17.7 billion more than BlackRock's revenue or Botswana's GDP that same year, and 17 times the amount the Sinaloa cartel under Joaquin El Chapo Guzman was estimated to have made at its peak. Unlike the Colombian or Mexican drug lords who often displayed power through violence, Tse ran his organization known as Sam Gor, or the Company, with the mindset of an executive inside a multinational corporation. He prioritized efficiency, anonymity, and strategic partnerships over bloody wars on the streets. Tse Chi Lop's life began in Guangzhou, China in 1963. To understand the foundation of his criminal mindset, it is necessary to look back at the history of the Big Circle Gang, also known as the Big Circle Boys or Dai Huan Jai, the organization that influenced Tse during his early years. The Big Circle Boys were not a traditional triad gang with elaborate rituals. The origins of the group were said to be connected to members of the Red Guards during the Cultural Revolution. When the movement became too violent and spiraled out of control, Mao Zedong disbanded the force and sent many of its members to re-education camps in Guangzhou. There, these individuals formed an alliance built on political disillusionment and hardened military skills. The name Big Circle was said to come from the red circles on maps of China used to mark prison camps. When members escaped to Hong Kong in the late 1960s and 1970s, they brought with them a reckless way of life, a deep distrust of authority, and an iron discipline in carrying out robberies of jewelry stores, casinos, and payroll offices. Tse Chi Lop was said to have absorbed these values before immigrating to Canada in 1988, at a time when the Big Circle Boys were beginning to establish heroin trafficking networks from the Golden Triangle to North America. After settling in Toronto, Canada, Tse Chi Lop quickly became an important figure in coordinating the activities of the Big Circle Boys. By the late 1980s, Asian criminal groups in Canada were frequently involved in armed conflicts over territory. But instead of joining direct gunfights, Tse showed a talent for diplomacy by establishing a business relationship with the Rizzuto crime family in Montreal, a powerful branch of the Italian mafia in North America. This alliance was unusual at the time because traditional mafia families often refused to deal directly with Asian criminal gangs. Tse managed to persuade the Rizzuto family by supplying pure heroin at a price 40% lower than the market rate in just 2 years. His ability to connect different groups turned Tse into the key figure responsible for moving drugs from Southeast Asia into Canada, then into the United States, and as far as Florida. In 1995, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, learned Tse's identity and his involvement through an indictment against his partners in New York, Paul Kwok, a Chinese-Canadian, and Yong Bing Gong, a Chinese-Malaysian. That same year, the FBI worked with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, or RCMP, to arrest Tse. But by that time, Tse had moved to mainland China, where the United States had no extradition treaty. The FBI could not pursue Tse until he arrived in Hong Kong, where the United States could request extradition under existing treaties. In 1998, after a long search by the FBI and the RCMP, T.S. was arrested in Hong Kong and extradited to the United States. While he was in custody, investigators described Tse as extremely intelligent, calm, and more like a gentleman conducting legitimate business than a criminal. To avoid the risk of a life sentence, Tse pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to traffic heroin, He cooperated carefully with prosecutors, while avoiding revealing too much information, expressed remorse during sentencing, and said he planned to open a restaurant after his release to care for his sick parents and his ill child. Tse was sentenced to 9 years in prison and ultimately served only 6 years before being deported to Canada in 2006 to complete 3 years of supervised release. His time at Elkton Prison in Ohio gave Tse the opportunity to meet and build relationships with key figures such as Lee Chung-chak, who would later become his lieutenant in the Sam Gor Empire. Both men were released around the same time in 2006, marking the beginning of a plan far larger than anything they had done before. After returning to Hong Kong around 2011, Tse Chi Lop recognized a shift in the global drug market. Heroin, which depended on opium harvests and was easier for drug-sniffing dogs to detect, was gradually giving way to synthetic drugs. Tse was said to have made a historic move, linking several major criminal organizations across Asia, including 14K, Bamboo Union, Sun Yi-on, Wo Shing Wo, and the Big Circle Boys, into an alliance known as the Company. This organization did not operate like any traditional criminal gang. It did not have a rigid hierarchy. Instead, it functioned more like a sharing economy, where each group contributed one part of the global supply chain. Sam Gor was said to have controlled between 40% and 70% of the wholesale methamphetamine market in the Asia-Pacific region. In 2018, the organization's annual revenue was estimated by the United Nations to be as high as $17.7 billion, comparable to the revenue of major corporations such as Citibank or BlackRock. Tse Chi Lop was compared to the Jeff Bezos of the drug trade because he applied customer service standards to criminal operations. One of the most notable mechanisms was the delivery guarantee system. If a shipment was seized by police, Sam Gor would replace it for the customer free of charge. This shifted the risk from the buyer to the seller, helping Sam Gor build a high level of trust with motorcycle gangs in Australia, such as Comanchero, and Yakuza groups in Japan. The empire also took full advantage of gaps in border control across the Golden Triangle, especially in Myanmar's Shan state. There, the network was said to have made use of large-scale production facilities protected by local militias such as the United Wa State Army, or UWSA. These laboratories were capable of producing large amounts of methamphetamine at low cost, thanks to abundant supplies of precursor chemicals from China and India. Tse's sophistication was also reflected in the fact that he was described as limiting his use of phones as much as possible, and often traveling by private jet to avoid ordinary tracking and movement control systems. He was also said to frequently host parties lasting for months at 5-star resorts, while at the same time maintaining extremely strict internal discipline. Torture videos found on the phone of one organization member showed that Sam Gor was willing to use serious violence against traitors or those who made major mistakes. To process billions of dollars in cash from drug operations, Sam Gor was said to have built a complex transnational money laundering system linked to casinos in Macau, Southeast Asia, and Australia. One important link in this system was Tse Chi Lop, a figure accused of operating an underground banking network capable of moving money through casinos in ways that were extremely difficult to trace. This system relied on the money exchange needs of wealthy individuals in China who wanted to move capital overseas. Sam Gor provided these people with United States dollars earned from drug sales in markets such as the United States or Australia. In return, their families or partners in China would transfer an equivalent amount of money into accounts or cryptocurrency wallets controlled by the organization. The process took place without any physical cash actually crossing borders, making it extremely difficult for law enforcement agencies to intervene using traditional methods. Casinos in the Mekong subregion, especially those in special economic zones in Laos and Myanmar, served as large-scale money laundering points. Sam Gor was said to have used junket groups to legitimize hundreds of millions of dollars through rounds of transactions, turning dirty money into gambling winnings or real estate investments. Tse first came to the attention of law enforcement in 2012. That year, the Australian Federal Police, abbreviated as AFP, learned about a man living in Hong Kong named Sam Gor through phone intercepts involving a fruit and vegetable seller in Melbourne, who was also a drug distributor, named Suki Liu. In 2013, AFP confirmed that Sam Gor was Tse through surveillance of a drug smuggling network in Melbourne. While the leaders of the network were in Hong Kong, the Hong Kong police force photographed Tse meeting with them and identified him for AFP. From there, the agency began to piece together Tse's life. 3 years later, in 2016, a mid-level member of Taiwan's bamboo union named Kai Zhengzhe was arrested at Yangon International Airport in Myanmar for carrying ketamine. Myanmar law enforcement agencies seized Kai's personal phone and found detailed records of Sam Gor's operations. After the contents were shared with AFP, one of the investigators identified Tse from photos on Kai's phone. The identities of Tse and other senior members were later shared with law enforcement agencies in China and Taiwan. The multinational cooperation that followed led to the disruption of some Sam Gor operations in Shan State, Myanmar, and sea-based drug smuggling routes to Australia. It also led to the largest drug seizure in Australian history in 2017, when 1.2 tons of methamphetamine were seized in Geraldton, Western Australia. The expansion of Sam Gor forced international security agencies to form an unprecedented investigative alliance. Operation Kungur, led by AFP, brought together about 20 agencies from countries including China, Japan, the United States, Canada, and Thailand. The top target, codenamed T1, was Tse Chi Lop. For years, Tse lived outside the reach of the law by moving constantly between Macau, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. In Taiwan, he even lived under the watch of security agencies during the COVID-19 pandemic, but was not arrested because there was no formal extradition agreement. The turning point came only when Reuters published an investigative report in 2019 exposing Tse's identity and role to the public and leaving him with fewer safe places to hide. On January 22, 2021, while traveling from Taiwan back to Canada, Tse Chi Lop was arrested by Dutch police during a layover at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. The arrest was quiet, with no resistance from the drug lord, who was 57 years old at the time. It was the result of an Interpol red notice requested by Australia. The extradition process lasted nearly 2 years because of legal complications. For the Netherlands to agree to extradite him, the Australian government had to make an official commitment that Tse would not face the death penalty or life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, in accordance with European human rights standards. Finally, on December 22, 2022, Tse Chi Lop was escorted to Australia to face justice over a charge of conspiring to smuggle methamphetamine, worth more than 4 million Australian dollars, into Australia during the period from 2012 to 2013. On December 4, 2025, the County Court of Victoria in Melbourne sentenced Tse Chi Lop to 16 years in prison. Tse will be eligible for parole after serving 10 years. During sentencing, the court stated that under ordinary circumstances, Tse could have faced a maximum sentence of life in prison. Judge Peter Rosen also acknowledged that this was a light sentence compared with the scale of Tse's crimes, but that it was a mandatory condition of the extradition agreement with the Netherlands. Along with Tse, several other senior associates also fell into the net. Lee Chung-chak was arrested in Bangkok in October 2020 and extradited to Australia in 2022. In April 2026, a 70-year-old senior member of Sam Gor, a British citizen of Chinese descent, was also sentenced to 15 years in prison for his role in coordinating methamphetamine shipments into Australia during the period from 2012 to 2013. Recent reports identified this man as Chung Chak Lee, described as Tse Chi Lop's right-hand man, who was sentenced to 15 years in prison in Melbourne. Although Sam Gor's mastermind had been arrested, the latest UNODC reports from 2024 and 2025 show that the synthetic drug market in East and Southeast Asia has not declined. In fact, it has continued to grow. The arrest of Tse Chi Lop only made the network more decentralized. The super labs in Shan state continued to operate under the protection of armed groups as Myanmar's civil war worsened after the coup in 2021. In 2024, methamphetamine seizures in East and Southeast Asia reached a record 236 tons, a 24% increase from 2023. Thailand remained the main transit point, with more than 1 billion synthetic drug tablets seized in just 1 year. Trafficking routes also expanded into Cambodia, Laos, and the maritime corridors connecting Malaysia, Indonesia, and the Philippines. One example of this trend was the dismantling of a drug production facility in Nha Trang, Vietnam, in March 2025. It was considered the largest drug production case in Vietnam's history, with 1.4 tons of ketamine and nearly 80 tons of precursor chemicals seized. The laboratory was carefully set up on a 1,000 square meter plot of land in a remote mountainous area, disguised as an industrial chemical production facility and protected by around-the-clock camera systems, electronic locks, and guard dogs. 11 suspects were arrested, including several foreign nationals. This showed that the company-style model, using transnational technical experts to produce drugs directly in consumer markets or at strategic transit points, was still appearing across the region. Tse Chi Lop was not only accused of transporting drugs. His influence also lay in changing the structure of transnational crime in the 21st century. By prioritizing corporate efficiency over gangland honor, Tse created a criminal model in which violence was the last resort, not the first objective. Sam Gor transformed small-scale laboratories into large production complexes, helping drive the price of methamphetamine across the region to its lowest level in a decade, while purity continued to rise. Sam Gor did not operate only in Asia. Investigations in 2026 showed that the organization was still capable of moving shipments from Canada to Australia, using the old connections of the Big Circle Boys in North America. The combination of casinos, underground banking, and cryptocurrency for money laundering created a major barrier for financial investigators around the world. In the eyes of experts, the arrest of Tse Chi Lop was an important symbolic victory, but it was not the end of Sam Gor. The stability of supply and demand had been established too firmly. The company today can be understood as a criminal operating system, where any smaller criminal group can plug in to use trafficking routes, supply sources, and money laundering systems. Tse Chi Lop redefined what it meant to be a kingpin in the modern era. Unlike El Chapo, who became a media symbol of the cartel world, or Pablo Escobar, who once tried to enter politics, Tse Chi Lop understood that in the modern world, anonymity was the real power. He lived a life full of contradictions, a man who dressed simply and spoke politely, yet was accused of running a network that pushed synthetic drugs across multiple countries. Although he is now serving his sentence in Australia, Tse's legacy, a criminal model with no borders, no enemies, only profit, continues to challenge the efforts of the international community. The cases in Nha Trang in 2025 and Operation Parks in 2026 are reminders that Sam Gor is like a hydra. When one head is cut off, others grow back, more sophisticated and more unpredictable than before. For that reason, the life of Tse Chi Lop is not just a criminal case. It is also a story about the frightening adaptability of crime in the age of globalization.